G'day curd nerds, today we're making a Bloomy Goat Blue. It's a twist on the traditional sherbet and kind of a little bit like Valençay. So this is, I got part of the recipe from one book, part of the recipe from another book. So I'm going to call it my, my Bloomy Goat Blue. There you go, there for want of another word. So we'll see how it turns out. It has the addition of aromatic mesophilic, it has Penicillium candidum, it has Geotrichum candidum, and it also has Penicillium Roqueforti. So quite a combination of moulds, and we'll see what happens to the cheese. Anyway, so let's get on with the video.
So the ingredients are 4 litres of goat's milk, 1/4 teaspoon of aromatic mesophilic culture, 1/8 teaspoon of Penicillium candidum, 1/64 teaspoon of Geotrichum candidum, and 1/64 teaspoon of Penicillium Roqueforti. Also, you'll need 1/4 teaspoon of calcium chloride, 1/4 teaspoon of liquid rennet, maybe a little bit more depending on the IMCU of your rennet. French ash, you'll need some French cheese ash, and some non-iodized fine salt. So we're going to bring the milk up to 22 degrees Celsius, which is 72 Fahrenheit. So this is a fairly low temperature for cheese making. I think there we go, there's our blue mould culture. So I'm using the Mad Millie sachet there. That's actually got a combination of aromatic and the Penicillium Roqueforti. So I'm just sprinkling that all over the top there. I opened up the packet as well just to make sure I got all the bits out. Now that only has 1/8 teaspoon of aromatic mixed with a small amount of blue mould. So what I had to do was add an additional sachet of aromatic mesophilic, which is another 1/8 teaspoon. So I had my 1/4 teaspoon of aromatic mesophilic. So for the other moulds, I just used the straight mould powder, and you'll see that in a second. Just getting the last of that aromatic out. So the next mould is the Penicillium candidum. So this is 1/4 teaspoon. And then the last but not least, the Geotrichum candidum, which is 1/64 teaspoon. There we go, there it is, Geotrichum. So this actually adds this helps prepare the surface for the for the Penicillium candidum, as well as the addition of the ash, as we'll see later on. Okay, so we let that rehydrate for 5 minutes. So after the 5 minutes has elapsed, we're going to give it a good stir, mix all those moulds and starter cultures into the goat's milk. So give it a good stir for about a minute or so, trying to stir mainly top to bottom. So after we've given it a good stir, we add the next ingredient in. So make sure the milk's moving when we add the other liquid ingredients. So we're going to add the calcium chloride now, and this will help with the curd set. So just give that a good stir as well for about a minute, making sure that's mixed thoroughly through the milk. And then the final ingredient, which is the rennet. So we're just going to add in the diluted rennet there. That's been diluted in a quarter of a cup of non-chlorinated water. If you use chlorinated tap water, you'll find it inhibits the renneting action. So the temperature has crept up just a little bit there, 1 degree, 1.5 degrees higher than it should be, but that's okay. This next step is very easy, very low maintenance at this stage. So give the rennet a good stir, no more than 1 minute, because it'll start coagulating otherwise and you'll start splitting up the milk. So we're going to let that rest now off the heat at room temperature for 18 to 24 hours. So that's at 22 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's 22 Celsius. So after a day, mine took 24 hours. So you can see little pools of whey on the top. I did a clean break. It was fairly sloppy, but I really couldn't wait much longer. You'll see at the end of the video some tips on where I think I went wrong. Anyway, so we're going to take slivers or slices of the curd and place them into our two 7 centimeter camembert molds, which is 3 inches, I think. Now you can see I thought at this stage I was heading for disaster. A fair bit of the curd was quite runny. You can see that leaking out of the bottom of the molds. It's not a good look. Now the good thing was there was some solid curd underneath that little top layer, but I did lose a fair bit down the sink, as you can see there. Reason for this is I didn't use enough rennet. I should have checked how much IMCU. So I'm only using 200 IMCU rennet. The recipe, or one of the recipes that I cobbled together for this, used 300 IMCU or 280 IMCU, so it needed to be a little bit stronger. So instead of the quarter of a teaspoon, I should have added 3/8, so that's another 1/8 of a teaspoon more. Now what you do here is you keep going. Keep calm and make cheese, as I'm title of my cheese making book. So yeah, I just let that shrink down a little bit and then we just put some more on top. So the curd was fairly tight and a lot stronger near the bottom, so it didn't leak out and run everywhere. So as it shrunk down, about every 30 minutes I did this, and put a few more slices on top to help it shrink down. So goat's milk it's very, well, I won't say difficult to work with, but if I had added a bit more rennet, it probably wouldn't have been so difficult. So this is another 30 minutes later, and you can see it shrunk down a bit, so adding a couple more slices on top. And you keep doing this until you have no more curds left in the bottom. So another 30 minutes later, shrunk down a bit more, add some more slices on top. I didn't want to speed this part up for you curd nerds, because I really wanted to just see how long it actually takes to make this cheese. Didn't want to skip any bits. So this was over the course of about, I would say about 6 hours. Okay, so I got it all in there, and once the molds were filled, don't add any extra molds, and then we're going to leave it to drain overnight. So this is the next day, and you can see it's shrunk down a fair bit. It's become slightly firm on top, still quite runny. Well, not runny. It's not as firm as it should be. So we're just going to clean off the cheese board there that I'm using, just with hot tap water. Just getting all that excess cheese off, because we're going to use this now to flip the molds over every couple of hours, just to start with. So just making sure the area is clean again. That was a clean sponge. It wasn't from the last night's dishes or anything like that. So I'm just going to place the board down there, Now, I ummed and ahed, or hemmed and hawed, or whatever you want to call it, couldn't quite work out how I was going to flip these little babies over. So first of all, I thought, well, I'll be clever and grab them by the top, and I'm flipping. I thought, no, they're too delicate, so that just won't work. Then I thought, I'll grab the board and I'll flip it over, and I thought, normally I have two boards the same, but Kim was using the other board for something at the time, so I couldn't use it. Anyway, so what I decided to do was just take those off, put the bamboo mat on, and just slap them on top. Just lift it up a bit so there wasn't too much pressure. And then for this next one, just flip it over. So you do this every 12 hours for the next 4 to 5 days. Mine took about 4 days to drain enough. They're probably about half the size, as you can see there. This is 4 days later. So now we're going to salt the cheese. So we're going to use a teaspoon on the top and bottom. So that's 2 teaspoons of fine salt over the entire surface. So I just did top and bottom and then rubbed it with my hands for the rest. So that's 1 teaspoon on the top of that one, and then another teaspoon on top of the second one, and I give it a bit of a rub. They're still fairly moist at this time, and they do absorb the salt very readily. So we're just going to flip them over now. Very delicate, so just be careful. Not like that. Yes, I wasn't. Slippery little suckers. Remind me of escargot. Anyway, so then we put another teaspoon on the bottom, which is now the top, if that makes sense. And then on the second one. So that's 2 teaspoons of fine salt all over the cheese, so the top, and then out of shot I actually rubbed the sides as well with the salt that was left in my hands. And that seemed to be enough, no problems at all. So you let those sit for 10 minutes just for the salt to absorb. So once the 10 minutes is over, I just transferred them to the draining mat that I'm going to use in the cheese box now. Notice in a small ramekin I've just added another teaspoon of fine salt, and then I've got this French ash, which is a vegetable ash, and I'm using 1.5 tablespoons of the French ash, putting that into the ramekin with the 1 teaspoon of salt that I put in there. Plop that in, so that's a level tablespoon, and then I've got a 1/2 tablespoon on this ring here somewhere. Just gonna find it. There we go. So 1/2 tablespoon, and we put that into the ramekin as well. Now, ash is very messy stuff, as you can see. Now, don't forget to seal it straight away in case you knock it over and all the ash goes flying everywhere. So I've just sealed the top of that again. So I'm using gloves. So I give that a bit of a stir. So I'm stirring the ash and the salt together. Very important for the next step. And try not to spill it on your cheese at this stage. Anyway, that's what it looks like. It's just looks like activated charcoal. Okay, so I've got a tea ball here, which you normally put tea leaves in, but scoop some of the ash into the tea ball, and then let it close. And then we're going to use that to sprinkle ash all over the top of the cheese. Now what the ash does, it actually lowers the pH of the surface of the cheese. Ash is an alkaline, so it's alkaline in nature, so it lowers the overall acidity of the cheese. Now this is good because the Geotrichum candidum and the Penicillium candidum need a less acidic surface to grow on properly. So that's why we're using ash, and a little bit of salt just helps with the flavour and preserving and that sort of stuff. So once you've done the top, you can just simply pat down the ash, just gently. You can see it puffing up there. Anyway, so just gently pat it. Now I thought this was a bit of a disaster, but it seemed to work out in the end. You get black ash all over you. Anyway, so we pick it up and hold it as best we can. You can see how moist these cheeses still are. And this was after 4.5 days of draining. Anyway, the ash kind of took some of the moisture out of it. So just give that a bit of a pat and then roll it over somehow, and then sprinkle some more ash and salt mixture onto the cheese. Now the ash doesn't add any flavour or anything like that. It just, as I said, it lowers the pH of the surface of the cheese. Okay, this is a pretty good coating. Don't worry about if you've got too many gaps there. Just sprinkle a bit more ash. Oops, I run out. And dip some more in there. There we go. A bit more over the surface. Whatever you do, don't squeeze the cheese ball because all the ash will go flying everywhere. Anyway, so I seem to have done the top and the sides, or the circumference, and I've got stuff, so I'll give it a quick wash. Anyway, so do the bottom, which is now the top of this one. Now you won't need much, you won't need any more ash than I prescribed in the recipe there, but so just sprinkle so there's an even layer over the top. Give it a pat. There we go, beautiful. That one's done, finally. So just swing them around, and then we're going to do exactly the same thing with the other one. So just give it a pat down once it's done, then give it another sprinkle. I'm sure there's an easier way, but this is the easiest way I could figure it out. There were no instructions in any of the recipes that I had. They just said sprinkle with ash. So I think this is quite ingenious. The little tea ball seems to work all right. You wouldn't do too many at once. If you had a whole plate or tray of these, I don't quite know how you'd do it. Anyway, the ash is fairly inexpensive and you don't use very much anyway. Anyway, there we are. I'm patting it down and it's fluffing up everywhere. Better wash my hands again. Alright, so then we place, once they're fully covered in ash, try and separate them as much as you can. And we're going to place them in the ripening box and mature at 10 degrees Celsius or 50 Fahrenheit at 90% relative humidity. And we're going to turn the cheeses every 2 days. So we don't put the lid on tightly, just have it loose. Anyway, so this was day 5 of the cheese making process. At day 9, you can see a little bit of bloom there, just on the sides. It's just starting to get there and it's starting to dry out. Make sure that you check how much moisture's in the ripening box. So this is at day 11, so wipe out any moisture that collects down the bottom. So this is day 11, after flipping every 2 days. You can see one's nearly totally covered. And then at day 15, you can see they're totally covered with the white bloom from both the Geotrichum and the Penicillium candidum. So that's just the simple procedure of flipping them over. So as I mentioned before, try and keep them apart as much as you can. So day 21, they're ready. This is what it looks like. So here's one of my little beauties. And they're ready to eat. So I don't want them maturing as long as normal Camembert or Brie. This is perfect. Right, so as you can see, very mouldy, and you can see the ash coming through just there. And same on this side, but let me just touch it. I've got ash on my fingers already. Doesn't take much, but you can see just by patting it down, you can see the ash. Anyway, so let's cut it open. I would expect it to be a little bit gooey or creamy on the outside, which it is, and that's perfect. So let's get down a little bit lower and have a look at that. So as you can see, there's a little bit of oozing on the sides, and that's great.
So let's see how it tastes. I've got some crackers here and we're going to cut into the cheese and see how it goes. Oh, it cuts very nice. It's very smooth paste. A little bit oozy around the outside, but that's okay. Now these are just normal water crackers. There's no flavouring on them whatsoever. Oh, that is absolutely delicious. So you've got the flavour of the cherv. So you've got the goat's cheese, a little bit of sharpness there. You can taste a little hint of the blue cheese, the Penicillium Roqueforti that's gone into it. And you can taste the silky smoothness of the outer rind. I'll tell you what's a flavour sensation. You can't taste the ash. So contrary to popular belief, you can't taste the ash. You don't need to cut it off. And where it's gone oozy, it's a little bit saltier than the inside part of the cheese. Oh, this is exceptional. I could win a contest with this. This is so nice. And the great thing is, I made it myself. How good's that? Oh, I'm going to have a bit more. Oh. Oh, look at that. That is absolutely delicious. That is an amazing cheese. So good. I could eat this whole thing if you let me, but I'm not gonna. Oh, this is so good. So smooth, creamy paste, a little bit of sharpness, but the two different molds, so there's no blue development in the cheese. You won't get that after. So this is the 21st day of this cheese's life. So 21 days old, and this is exactly when I would cut it. I wouldn't let it develop anymore because you get too much ooziness in the rind itself, in between the rind and the surface of the cheese. But this is perfect. This is what I was after. I was after a bloomy goat's cheese with a little bit of blue cheese flavour and the sharpness of the cherv. So, and it certainly has done that, and it's come out in spades. So that's fantastic. Really is a delightful cheese. What would I do differently? I think that during the draining, let's go back to the start. I would have added probably another 1/8 of a teaspoon of rennet. So I added 1/4 teaspoon of rennet. I would do that. That way it wouldn't all run. The softer part of the curd, when I was putting it into the moulds, it wouldn't run. Like you saw, I thought it was going to be a disaster at that stage, but I persevered. Make sure you let them sit for at least 5 days in the camembert moulds. Otherwise, they'll go flat when you take them out. They have to drain excessively. There's a lot of moisture in this cheese because of the way we let it set, and we didn't cut it or anything like that. So do that. And I think the saltiness is right, so I got the salt right. So it was a teaspoon top and bottom. And I just rubbed that all over the cheese before I added the ash. And another thing with ash, it's messy stuff. So I found that little tea bag ball that I had, that worked really well on distributing the ash all over the cheese consistently and getting a proper layer. So I think that worked very well as well. And I was so impressed with the mold growth. What I did with the box was, instead of putting the lid on properly, all I did in the cheese cave, and this is what I'm going to do now for all bloomy cheese, is put the lid like that. Okay, so that prevents any of the moisture from dripping on the top. If there's any condensation, it was humid enough. This cheese was certainly moist enough, so I didn't have to worry about it too much. So I just kept the lid on it like that. I didn't seal it like I normally would. Would have been too humid. just like that, and the mould grew perfectly, so there was no issue whatsoever. So that's how I managed the ripening box. Anyway, if you want to make this cheese, pop over to littlegreenworkshops.com.au and you can see all the supplies there. I even got a whole bunch of French ash in, just in case anybody wanted to make this one. Also, don't forget that you can subscribe to the channel and be notified of all these cheesy videos that I make. Thanks for watching, Curd Nerds, and we will see you next time.